The Lee Enfields. The Lee Enfields are a family of bolt-action, magazine-fed rifles chambered in .303 British. They served as the British service rifle for 62 years, from their official adoption in 1895 to their replacement in 1957. The short magazine Lee Enfield Mark III entered service in 1907 and was the rifle carried by British soldiers at the start of World War I. A simplified variant, the Mark III Star, followed in 1916, which removed the magazine cutoff and the long-range volley sights. It featured James Paris Lee's rear-locking bolt system and a 10-round detachable magazine, enabling soldiers to fire up to 30 aimed shots per minute. Reliable and effective, it is still regarded as one of the most successful bolt-action rifles of all time. The Pattern 1914. The Pattern 1914, or P14, was Britain's answer to the Mauser rifles after their effectiveness in the Second Boer War. Based on the earlier Pattern 13, which used its own magnum round, the P14 was chambered in .303 British with a 5-round integral magazine. It was essentially a modified Mauser action with Lee Enfield features. Since British factories lacked the capacity for mass production, manufacturing was contracted to the United States. P14 rifles were issued mainly to second-line troops to free up Lee Enfields for front-line use. In 1918, Britain also adopted the P14 as a sniper rifle as they were more accurate than SMLEs, though few saw combat. Already being produced in the U.S., the P14 was adopted and modified into the M1917 Enfield, which was America's most common rifle in World War I. The Ross Rifle. The Ross Rifle Mark III, adopted in 1910, was Canada's controversial service rifle going into World War I. A straight-pull bolt action chambered in .303 British with a 5-round integral magazine. It is believed that the design came from the Mannlicher straight-pull rifle family. Older versions were mechanically different from the 1910 rifle. It was hailed by its inventor, Sir Charles Ross, as the most perfect rifle of its time. In practice, however, Canadian troops in Europe found it problematic. The Ross jammed frequently due to its bolt design and incompatibility with British-manufactured ammunition, and it even had a tendency to launch its bayonet forward when fired. By 1916, the Ross Mark III was replaced by the SMLE, though it continued to see use as a marksman's rifle, where it excelled until the war's end. Type 30 and Type 38 Arisaka. The Type 30 and Type 38 were Japanese bolt-action service rifles chambered in 6.5 Arisaka. The Type 30 was designed under the supervision of Colonel Arisaka Nariaka to be the replacement for old Murata rifles at the end of the 19th century. After the Russo-Japanese War, Major Nambu redesigned the gun and turned it into the Type 38. At the outbreak of the Great War, Britain purchased 150,000 of these rifles, issuing them to Royal Navy sailors to conserve Lee Enfields for frontline troops. Some rifles even went to Arab forces in the Middle East. The Webley Revolvers. The Webley Revolvers were a series of double-action, top-break revolvers mainly chambered in .455 Webley. First adopted in 1887, they served across the British Empire. The Webley Mark V was the official service revolver in 1914, though many Mark IVs still remained in use. In 1915, the Mark VI was introduced, featuring improvements over earlier models. Chambered in a hard-hitting round and built ruggedly, Webleys were well suited for trench warfare. Accessories such as bayonets, speed loaders, and shoulder stocks were also developed. Remaining in service beyond World War I, the Webley became one of the most iconic sidearms in history. The Colt New Service. The Colt New Service was a swing-out, double-action revolver produced from 1898 to 1941. Essentially an improved Colt M1892, designed for larger calibers. It was adopted by the U.S. military. Canada also used it in the Second Boer War, and the Northwest Mounted Police also issued it. During World War I, Britain and Canada acquired 55,000 new service revolvers chambered in .455 Webley as substitutes for Webleys. Known in the U.S. Army as the M1909, the new service later inspired the design of the Colt M1917. The Smith & Wesson Triple Lock. The Smith & Wesson Triple Lock, also known as the 44-hand ejector first model New Century, was a swing-out, double-action revolver featuring a third locking lug, hence its name. It was the first to be chambered in .44 Special, which later became the .44 Magnum cartridge. During the First World War, the British Ministry of Munitions contracted Smith & Wesson to produce 5,000 of these revolvers in .455 Webley, known as the .455 hand ejector first model. Later orders totaled 69,755 of the simplified second model, which lacked the third lock. These revolvers served as substitute standards to the Webleys alongside the Colt New Service. The Webley Self-Loading Pistol. The Webley Self-Loading Mark I was a semi-automatic pistol chambered in .455 Webley Auto. A 32 ACP version was adopted by the London Metropolitan Police, while the .455 variant entered Royal Navy service in 1912. During trials, the Royal Navy was incredibly impressed by its performance. The British Army, however, decided to stick with the revolvers. A stocked carbine version intended for the Royal Horse Artillery was instead issued to the Royal Flying Corps, according to some sources. The Webley pistol proved accurate, reliable, and popular with pilots. However, no more than 10,000 pistols saw service, and it was phased out after 1918. The Colt M1911. The Colt M1911 government model was a semi-automatic pistol designed by John Browning for the .45 ACP cartridge. It was developed to the U.S. Army's request for a more powerful weapon to effectively counter enemies like the Moros in the Philippines. Known for its stopping power and follow-up shots, it quickly earned a reputation among troops. At the start of World War I, Canada purchased 5,000 Colt government models in .45 ACP, and in later years Britain acquired about 13,000 chambered in .455 Webley Auto for the Royal Flying Corps and Naval Air Service. Conversions to the semi-rimmed Webley cartridge were fairly simple since both .455 Webley Auto and .45 ACP were dimensionally similar. The M1911 proved to be powerful and deadly in combat, and continued to see service for another 100 years. The Vickers Machine Gun. The Vickers Machine Gun was a closed-bolt, water-cooled, recoil-operated weapon chambered in .303 British, a derivative of the Maxim, redesigned by Vickers in 1912. It inverted the Maxim's toggle lock mechanism, making it lighter. At the start of the war, British forces had not yet realized the tactical potential of machine guns. By 1915, the Machine Gun Corps was formed, with the Vickers at its core. By the end of 1918, more than 70,000 Vickers would be produced for the British military. Its air-cooled variant was also the main armament on Allied fighter aircrafts in the war. Regarded as one of the finest Maxim derivatives, the Vickers served as Britain's main heavy-medium machine gun for over 50 years, until it was replaced by the FNMAG in the 1960s. The Lewis Gun. The Lewis Gun was an open-bolt, gas-operated, air-cooled light machine gun chambered in .303 British and .30-06. Designed in the United States by Colonel Isaac Newton Lewis, it was initially rejected by the U.S. Army but mass-produced in Britain. Distinctive for its aluminum barrel shroud, intended for better cooling, and being fed by a 47-round pan magazine, or a 97-round pan in aircraft models. Issued widely to infantry from 1916 onward, it was heavy and somewhat complex, but reliable and effective. German forces captured and used about 10,000 Lewis guns themselves, a testament to its quality. The Hotchkiss. The Hotchkiss Portative was a lighter version of the French Hotchkiss heavy machine gun. Air-cooled and gas-operated, it was fed by rigid ammunition strips and produced in 303 British, 30-06, and 8mm Lebel. In Britain, it was manufactured at Coventry as the Hotchkiss Mark I and issued to cavalry. The Mark I Star variant was a prominent secondary armament on British heavy tanks. It replaced the stock with a pistol grip and featured improved feed strips that worked like an ammo belt. British Mark IV tanks mounted Lewis guns instead, but they were found to be difficult to use in tight spaces. Mark V tanks later returned to using the Hotchkiss Mark I Star. The Colt-Browning M1895/14. The Colt-Browning M1895/14, nicknamed the Potato Digger, was the first successful gas-operated machine gun to enter service, and also John and Matthew Browning's first machine gun. It was exported to many countries in 7 different cartridges. Its unusual lever mechanism, inspired by Browning's lever-action rifles, resembled a digging motion when fired, giving it its name. The 303 British variant entered service with Canadian forces in the Second Boer War, where it was utilized effectively. It went on to be used in the early years of World War I, when the Canadian Expeditionary Force faced machine gun shortages. After Vickers production had caught up, leftover potato diggers were reassigned to other units like the Belgian Exile Army. Other weapons. Between 1914 and 1918, the British Armed Forces also relied on a wide variety of non-standard weapons. Older rifles such as the Lee Metford Mark I and II, Martini Henrys, and Martini Enfields were issued to colonial and reserve troops or used in training until Lee Enfield production caught up. The Royal Navy purchased some 20,000 Winchester 1892s, 5,000 Winchester 1894s, and 7,000 Remington rolling block rifles, again, to conserve Lee Enfields for the front. These were gradually phased out as the war progressed. The Royal Flying Corps also purchased small numbers of Winchester 1886 rifles, which were loaded with incendiary cartridges to counter German airships and balloons, as well as Winchester 1907s and 1910s for aircraft observers. Officers frequently made private purchases of weapons of their own choice, ranging from Lee Speed rifles and Mauser C96 pistols to Webley Fosbury automatic revolvers. Shortages of Vickers machine guns in the early years also forced some units to rely temporarily on older Maxim guns until supply was sufficient. Britain also ordered Spanish-made Smith & Wesson No. 3 revolver and .455 Webley under the name Pistol OP. Some sources claim that up to 30,000 guns were bought. Just like many other Spanish firearms sold to the Allies, there was no standardization of production, meaning quality varied throughout guns.